Hello and welcome to Juan Around, the podcast where we talk with people. I am Juan, and I am glad that you are here with me today. Our guest for this episode is Jordan Kotsevski, a writer from Ohrid, North Macedonia. Jordan is also a nice person. He's a husband and a father of 2 kids. He works as a tour guide and teaches people about his beautiful country. He likes to participate in different projects and to help other writers and artists. In this episode, we will learn more about Jordan and his writing. We will ask him how he started writing, what inspires him, and what he wants to achieve with his words. I hope you will enjoy listening to Jordan as much as I did. He is a very talented and kind writer, and I am happy to have him on my show. So please join me as we go around with Jordan Kotsevski, who lives for writing. Where basically I was intrigued about how you, as a writer, kind of deal with the idea of your language, Macedonian, not being basically outside of Macedonian. Nobody speaks Macedonian, right?
Yes.
Is it hard to get an audience?
If we talk about audience outside Macedonia, it's very difficult. I mean, let's say we already have some established authors. Some of them have managed to get translations, have managed to get to the English market, which I guess is the most popular in a way because people who are not native speakers can read your books because most of the people read or speak English. And even for them, it was difficult. But usually there's connections and stuff like that. But I also think that it's not very easy to gain the Macedonian audience because there's a lot of prejudice about Macedonian authors who are writing genre fiction.
Oh, really?
Because we are being compared to the US and what else, worldly authors that are already translated in Macedonian. So it wasn't easy, and for me it was a long-term plan, which was constantly changing. My idea, the general plan was before I get to 40 years that I start making money out of writing. And my first money I earned on 35 years, when I was 35 years old. But it still wasn't something being published, it was a competition. And I won the award for an emerging author, which was, the limit was 35 years old. So I was at the limit. And I was kind of constantly thinking about whether I want to go directly on the English market or whether I want to turn to our audience. Because as you said, the Macedonian language, it's not a language that a lot of people are speaking. It's basically based on the borders of our country. So the plan was to do everything in English. So my first book was written in English. My first novel was completely written in English. And somewhere before the Corona, I realized that I would rather start because becoming a self-published author in English, it's a huge effort, which means it will take a lot of my time as my writing time or free time that I will have to spend for engaging audience, building a newsletter or Facebook commercials, learning Amazon self-publishing, things like that. The other option was also to search the market and find where I can submit, whether the publishers that are accepting frauds, how things are functioning. And at that point, I said that because of from the podcast that I was listening, one of the conclusions I got to was that it's best if you have more than one book, and then to invest into self-publishing and promoting your books. Because like that you attract audience to one book, but you already have 2 books that they will buy. So you spend one amount, but it's for the 3 books. although you are advertising one. So if you have one, it's only spent for that one. Then you have to do it for the second one and for the third one, let's say. And I think that was the main reason why I decided to turn to the Macedonian market, which meant, in another way, it was also easier. Easier in a sense that I had to build my audience. So again, you have to have the marketing sense built in you. Although you are an author, you are writing, and in theory, the publishing house is supposed to be doing that. But when it comes to practice, it turns out that the author also needs to invest his time. However, working with Macedonian audience, again, it was easier because there were at that point only 2 readers groups in which I started engaging as a reader, not as an author. So at some point, people started guessing that I probably am writing something. I participated in online events, and thanks to the corona, I could engage more online with the audience. Although there weren't audience back there, they were just fellow readers. So we did poetry readings. There was an amateur writers club that I was part of. And I participated in the book club they had. We debated about books. So in a way, I was slowly building up my audience. And in something like a year, I launched, after I started all this, I launched my first novel through a publicist. The publishing house was unknown for the audience because they were mostly publishing poetry. So anyway, I've met the owners and here in Ohrid, and it's how I decided that I would rather get published for my first novel through them. So the way that things are functioning here, if you want to get paid, basically it's not the publisher saying, okay, we see potential, we will take your book, we will give you this % of sales, this fixed amount. No. Most of us are getting paid by the government, meaning there are subsidies for domestic authors. So you approach a publisher, the publisher gets your draft version, does review of the book, and then they submit the manuscript, the draft version of the manuscript together with the review and other forums for getting subsidies from the government. So we do this during late September, October. The results are coming in February, March. And basically, if the book passes, you get your fees. If you are good in haggling or bargaining with the publisher, you may get something extra from the sales. And usually this is how things are functioning here at this point. That's how it worked for me. So my first novel is named Jars, Tegli, and it went to the publishing house Panava Publications, which means PNV Publications. So it got the grant from the Ministry of Culture, and in November 2021, we had the promotion in Skopje. So back to my engagement with the groups. This was time when Corona protocols were still active, and I managed to attract around 40-something people audience for my debut novels.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was in a way for us, for this market, it was a success. And the sales was even bigger because people who didn't have the vaccination certificate, they would order through someone who was there to buy the book for them. So I was signing. It was a very great experience for me as an author because it was my debut book. Yeah. So I'm kind of how would you say? I'm feeding on that energy. And I continued my engagement with the audience now as an author, but both as a reader. And I've made friends out of the people who are reading books. So I wouldn't say they're just the audience now. They're also my friends. And it's also people who I talk to about books in general, about what they're reading, what I'm reading. And it's been quite a great time for me, great 2 years, because I got my 4th book out last month. Well, it's July now, so it was in May. It was out in May. And I'm satisfied the way that things been going on for me.
What do you think it makes you feel attracted to writing?
Oh, always, I know this is a cliche, but for me, there's another motive. I've always wanted to be a writer. And the reason was that I had a strong connection with my grandfather, who passed away when I was 2.5 years old. I didn't accept his death. I would always say grandpa is on a trip. And the first time I faced it was when I was 7 years old, that he's really, really gone. And I couldn't remember anything about him except that I had this connection with this person. And I couldn't remember his face except for what I saw on the photos. And it was that point that I was always good at telling stories. And by realizing this, it was that point that I decided I want to be a writer, because in case something happens to me, I want to leave something behind me, my fictional stories that my, grandchildren will remember me by. So it wasn't the typical, for me.
Do you think that you create a whole backstory for your grandfather?
Probably, because I wasn't, it kind of got lost when I realized that he was really gone. And I realized my motivation about becoming a writer later in my life when I was 19 years old. So between those 7 and 19 years old, it took me quite some time to realize why I really, really wanted to become an author. But the good thing is that I continued wanting to be an author, because for me, writing is like breathing, especially now that I've published my first novel. And I went into the loop of also getting the energy of having a promotion, book signings, interaction with audience, talking with people who have read your book. And especially now, it's like a drug. So you do a promotion, you feel the excitement, the energy, and you're like, oh, I want to write because I want to feel that energy again. So for me, it really functions like that. I mean, I had that when I was acting. So you finish the play, you get the applause at the end, you're really, really happy. People cannot see my expressions that I'm making, me shaking my hands, so you know that I'm shaking my hands now with fists, like exaggerating my feelings. Anyway, it's a really strong feeling, and the day after you feel great, and then the next week you do the same play again and you feel the energy again. But here it's special because you're just one actor. You're the one who did all the job, together with the publisher to get the finishing product, but you're the one who did the actual writing. And I love it. I also love when I sit and write and I notice that when I can't write, I'm cranky. And I get pissed off really easy. And then I know, okay, it's the reason I don't have time to write. And I would tell everyone, just give me 15 minutes so I can write something and I'll be better.
So basically, it's what you are. It's part of who you are.
It's part of who I am. Yes, I think that, I cannot live without it. It's like breathing.
Okay.
For me.
And you were telling me about your grandfather. Do you believe that writing is a way to preserve your essence? In a way, you were saying, well, people will remember me, my stories and stuff like that. What do you want to be remembered about? Like, if they can interpret your personality through your books, what they will say about you?
First of all, I got the chills when you asked me because I've never thought about it before. So I've never asked myself that question, and nobody asked me it, obviously. Well, what I like about my books, they are different. And I think I will remain an enigma if somebody starts trying to get the author by reading their books, because the 4 books are different. There's in the first book, I think there's most of my sense of humor in it. In the 4th book are most of my emotions. The second book is based on my life with my wife as an influencer, but most of it is, of course, fictional. It's only the dynamic between the couple that's in the story that's basically our dynamics. And in the third, it's my imagination of creating alternative things. So I think that I want to be inspired, and I don't want to be, I am inspired by anything in my life. It could be a very simple thing that gets me inspired. And when I write my stories, there's always just a small piece of me in it, and the rest is my imagination.
There are some people that say, well, think about all the things that you could have done just by, instead of that day waking up and said, it's not possible, just believe in yourself and say it's possible. Did you told me, I want to live. Do you feel that there was something in you that also was doubting about being successful, that was like, how was that struggle, that internal struggle?
Doubt is constantly there. It's constantly there. Like when I wrote my first novel, and it was great, and then I had an idea for a sequel, and it was planned as a standalone, and I was afraid to start the sequel, because whether I could keep the same, the main character has a sense for dark humor, he's very sarcastic, and I doubted if I can maintain the same level, the same humor, the same, it's because it's about me putting high expectations on myself. I don't think the audience will have those high expectations. It's the pressure that I was creating on myself. But then when I got the story, I started writing. And today I was writing a scene, and I was like, at one point I stood up, and I was like, maybe this will be boring. Will it be interesting? Will it be funny? But then I was like, shake it off, brush it off, and continue writing, because doubt it's in your head. I think it's not easy. So let's start. I mentioned that for me it was on a long term. So for me, the plan started when I was 26, 27 years old. But I made a concrete plan when I was 30 years old. Like before that, I was still practicing. I was trying to develop my style, to develop my sense of writing, to learn show, don't tell, and things like that. And so even then you have, I would always focus on what I can achieve now. And that's why if you have a long-term goal, you put a realistic short-term goal. Like my goal was, I have an idea for a short story, I sit and write short story. I have an idea for a long story, this is not the time, put it aside, write the idea, focus on what I can achieve now. Because if I started writing my first novel back then, my doubt would be much higher, and it would be more difficult to finish 75,000 words story. Because I didn't have the experience. I would constantly doubt myself more than I doubted when I started writing the novel. And that's why I would put this short term, like the first year I did 20-something pages in the whole year. The next year I decided I will increase it, so it was 40. After that it was 80, afterward it was 100. And I could see that my stories were becoming longer and longer. And I said, okay, now's the time to give myself a try and see if I can do something larger, like something longer, not larger.
And the first time that you wrote in English, did you notice a difference on how to use the language between Macedonian and English?
So I think the audience gonna love this, because I had a problem writing in Macedonian. I didn't have a problem writing in English, because my first goal was to write in English. So my mindset was already put in English, which means that I would use English phrases, which didn't work in Macedonian. So when I translated a short story of mine from English to Macedonian, I would translate those phrases literally. And like when English people say, what do you do for a living? We don't actually say that, we just say, what do you do? And it means, what do you do for a living? And I would translate it literally. And then you go and wait, something's wrong with this. Oh, I've translated literally. And there were other things like that. So for me, it was the other way around. It was a problem to start writing in Macedonian, because I've been for 6-7 years constantly writing in English, because that was the first idea. My first plan was that.
Yeah. Now, for example, in Spanish, between Spanish and English, I noticed that English is more like blocked, and Spanish is more fluid.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's something like some similar stylistic differences do you notice between Macedonian and English?
First of all, Macedonian language has a gazillion times. So sometimes when I write, I have to really, really focus on which tense I'm using. And in English, it's much simple because you have past simple and past perfect, and that's it. And it's easier to fix on the grammar. In Macedonian, it was harder for me I had to recheck until it became more easier for me to write. It's also because of my mindset. I had problem finding the proper words in Macedonian, and we have a huge lack of, how do you call it, onomatopoeia, was it? Or when you write sounds with words.
Okay.
So we are very poor on writing sounds. And I really needed, I have a story, and I had it in my mind in English, but I was, and the whole, the most tension was created by the sounds. And in English, it was easy. It was slash, thumb, thing, and because there were different weapons, and they were closing up on one person, on the main character. And when I had to translate it in Macedonian, I couldn't just say thud because thumb. And I had to write descriptively the sound. And it lost the dynamic that the story in my mind had. Yeah. So I had to figure out how to keep the tempo of the story, how to build the tension, but differently. So sometimes it can be easier to write in Macedonian, but sometimes it's more difficult.
And when you mention about the times, why so many times, or what is the deal?
We have let's say we have the past simple, we have the past perfect, we have past simple future tense, past tense, and it becomes complicated. So you have to focus on whether you're. Well, I found a way how to tell my stories, and it makes it simple for the reader as well. Because I would use the past tense, I would never go with paster than past like. You know? Okay. I would keep it to the current past tense. That's it. If something started before, I wouldn't say he entered the building, but before he entered the building, he had done this. No. I would start it from before entering the building. He did this, and then he entered the building. Okay. So I would not get lost in the tenses that we have.
And those are the disadvantages, I would say, of Macedonian. Do you find any advantage in Macedonian, or is it very hard?
I love how it sounds when you're reading it.
Okay.
I really like our rules of reading because learning how to read Macedonian language, it's easy because it's 31 letters, one sound, one letter, that's it. And we have the rule for accent, which comes on the third syllable fulmen to the beginning of the word. And I really, really love when you read it. I love the pronunciation of our language. I enjoy when I read my stuff written in Macedonian. Okay. There's there's a different fluidity, like you said with the Spanish. It's different. I maybe because it's my native language, maybe because of that.
Do you feel that it's more like an oral language, that the sound is...
Yes. I think because I love the j sounds of it, the j, which are you don't see them often in other languages, and we have it in a lot of words, and it's nice when you hear them.
Yeah. We're learning some words and some stuff, and it's just we're the Cyrillic alphabet, okay, this P, it's an R, and then the other one,
the P, the R.
Once you get the grip,
like my name, Jordan, it's Jordan because the J is
yeah. But it's the sound is really nice.
Java, frog.
Java is
frog, but the J, it's one letter.
Oh, I'm going to remember that Java. Oh, okay, cool. I also see that when we met, I saw that there were many people doing poetry.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct? Like many?
Yeah, I feel when it comes to events, most of the events in Macedonia are focused on poetry. So that was another thing for me. It was difficult. You're becoming a prose author, and other authors need to find about you. So we're not talking about the audience, because the audience, if you are okay with social network interaction, you can attract the audience. But to attract the authors so they can hear your name, find out about your works, and maybe read something that you've written, it's more difficult because they are not prose events. So for poetry, it's easier. You get to participate, you get to meet people, you do networking much easier than if you are a prose author. And even here, you participated in one event. We organized an event on 21st of June, and we have another event on 16th of July. Kaži. Okay, I'm talking to myself.
It's okay.
Da, ги видов.
И ще запозна
Со Мила, брачада Јодана?
со Изабел.
Изабела, супер. Добро, одигре си, јас овде сум. I had to get an update to her school friends meeting her neighbor friends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's very cute, your daughter. What's her name again?
Mila.
Mila.
Yeah.
Does it mean something?
Deer.
Deer. Oh, okay.
But not the deer like Bambi, but deer.
Deer like in English, like
deer, like sweet, like sweetheart.
It's incredible. We were talking about how here in Macedonia, or I guess in Ohrid more, you can just have your kids.
Yes, because so for the listeners, we are at the music school, but there's like a mini square which we don't get a direct view of it, and my daughter is over there playing with her friends. I just left her there because I really like that about Ohrid. It's a very calm town, and you feel safe. Like let's say my boy gets out around. I know that today he's 13 years old, and he's gonna go out around 8 o'clock. He comes back around 10, sometimes 10:30, which means after dark. And I feel safe that he's out, and I don't get my cell phone and where are you? What are you doing? No, because it's Ohrid. There's tourists around it. You just go by the lake, and it's really, I love that about. Even when I was growing up, it was the same. Like you go out when you're a teenager. Sometimes you come back at 2 o'clock later. Sometimes you come at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you feel safe.
Yeah. Do you think that here in Ohrid, it's a different, it's different than, for example, Skopje, and it's like a different pace, and people are like,
the pace is definitely different because Skopje is a very busy town. Like 1/3 of the population of Macedonia is living there. So it's a huge town, especially it hosts a lot of students during the academic year, and it's big, which means in Ohrid you can go everywhere walking or by bike. In Skopje, sorry, you can't. I mean, it takes time to get from point A to point B. I do think that Skopje, it's, let's say, somewhat safe town, same as here. Maybe there's a bit more pickpocketers than here, but when it comes to violence, I still think that even the capital is a safe town.
And do you think that having this extra time, that not having to, I don't know,
drive, or go to public bus, spend 1 hour in a public bus.
Do you think that gave you a lot of advantage for, okay, I have these 2 hours that I can just write?
Yeah. Look, I think that even if I was in Skopje, I would probably be writing in the bus. Okay. Or maybe I would get my phone out and record my thoughts. And I'm working as a tour guide. And often, like, we have a tour from Ohrid to Skopje, which is a 3 hours drive. So on the way to Skopje, you speak in the bus, which means you're busy. But on the way back, I'm not. We are just relaxing. So those 3 hours I would spend developing my stories in my thoughts, or sometimes I would write because I get car sick. It's usually when we are on a freeway, I can get to write something, but then everything happens in my mind. So I think that for me, I would spend that time definitely being creative in something.
Definitely, it's like a drug for you.
Oh yeah, it's definitely like a drug for me. Like when I focus on a story, so what happens to me is when I'm writing, I'm completely focused on that story. So when I'm not talking to someone, I'm thinking about my story. And I usually like to write off-season when I'm not tour guiding. Not because I can't write while I'm guiding, because like maybe I have 2 days between tours, 3 days between tours. But the problem is I need the mindset. Because when I'm not guiding, I'm completely focused on my story. So it happens when I'm at home. Sometimes my wife talks to me. I reply. I know that I'm replying. I know that she's asking me something. I just reply. Don't have a clue 5 minutes after I know that we spoke, but I have no clue what she asked me, what I answer. Because I'm completely focused on that. And let's say I usually write in the morning till 2 o'clock. I told them this is my working hours. So when I'm on the computer, don't touch me, I'm working. But even afterwards, like when I'm not doing interaction with my kids, my wife, or going out somewhere with my kids, I'm focused on my story. And that's why I need that not guiding, not being focused with problems of, I don't know, my father, my family problems and this and that. I need that time to think, because the next day when I sit, writing goes faster and without doubt, because you've been thinking about it. And it also gives me an advantage where I can just switch my story easily because I've been thinking about it. So when I start writing, if I see that maybe this is better, it's easier for me to make the decision. Because sometimes I'm stuck with making stupid decisions. Like today, I spent 15 minutes about making a decision what one of the characters should reply. And it was 15 minutes of me standing up, scrolling on Facebook, sitting down, standing up. And I said, okay, just do the first thing that pops on your head. And I did that just so I can continue working.
Okay, and probably it's in the back of your mind and body, you need to change it again.
So now I was talking about my story. You are asking me that, and I was like, in my mind, I'm already at the end of my story, and a thought came of how to continue where I stopped today.
Currently, are you writing like a long piece or?
So I think that this will be the longest. So all of my stories are around 70 to 75,000 words at this point. So I'm writing the sequel of my first book, and it will be longer because I'm 55,000 words in it, and this is just around 50-60% of the story. I've learned how to take things slowly, like I said. So today I had 3 people in an office. So one of the main characters comes into office, and he needs to do petty talk with them so he can steal something from the office. And I was like, okay, well, why not just start with a boring explanation of, it's not boring, it's boring for me because I don't like to do descriptions. So it's not boring, it's boring for me. But I try to do descriptions differently because when I read description, the guy entered the room. The plant was on the left, the bureau was in red, the painting of this and that. I hate descriptions like that. So I tend to avoid descriptions like that when I can, because sometimes you have to do it like that. So for me, it was like thinking how to make the interaction more interesting for me. First of all, it should be interesting for me as a writer, because I know that if it's interesting for me as a writer, it will be interesting for the audience. And then I decided, okay, I have 4 characters. Why not have one character who's like who's the other guys will start picking on him? And I went with that. You know, it's funny to write about the dynamics of 3 people who are constantly in one office. They're side characters, and we will not see them again, but I still want them to be interesting. I want that chemistry to be interesting.
I get it. Now, most of your, the things that you write is, if I'm not mistaken, is thriller.
Not really. That's why I said all my stories are different. So there's a huge stigma in Macedonia about genre authors. I mentioned that before. basically you are put in the basket of a bad author if you're writing genre fiction.
Okay.
So for English-speaking audience, you're probably wondering what's genre fiction. Basically in Macedonian, we have belletristica and genre fiction. So whether you're writing thriller, horror, comedy, romance, you're put in genre fiction basket. So there's a big, huge stigma about genre fiction writers, and I try to attract the other audience because it's a good quality. Let's say my first story. It's a good quality thriller with a great message, great characters. It picks on topics of domestic violence, family abuse on different levels, and we see the consequences in a grown-up man. So it's kind of... So my first book basically is thriller. My second book, it's psychological thriller. My fourth is paranormal, but still a thriller. But it has, out of these three thrillers, it has the most detective story, or you can say it paranormal mystery thriller.
Okay.
And my fourth book, it's more like a drama. It starts like that, like a psychological state of mind of the main character, and slowly develops into a mystery with a little bit, I don't know, paranormal or science. Well, it's not science fiction because I used procedure which is still practiced in modern times.
Okay.
Except I used it so we can develop a sixth sense in the main character.
Excuse me, you told me that there is, what is the other name?
Belletristica is how they call it. Basically, it's drama. It's philosophy. How would you put it? Like, when you write something, a story about a character that has a very difficult life in Macedonia and talks about it constantly, and basically you are listening to his state of mind, and there's some big metaphors behind it, some big philosophy behind it. And at the end, we came to some great, I don't know, enlightenment that basically you can have in genre fiction as well.
Okay. I kind of get it. And when you write this type of books, do you follow certain rules? For example, I think it was Agatha Christie was saying that you need to know the ending first and then build. Do you have something like that?
I do a lot of my writing instinctively. It depends. Sometimes I know the ending, sometimes I don't. Let's say the first book I wrote called Words, which is the fourth book I published on Macedonian, is called Zborovi. So for this book, I didn't know the ending. I know the first third of the book. I knew parts of the second third of the book, but I did not know the ending. So while I was writing, I was putting up some open things so I can take the ending on different ways. And as I was writing, the ending came to me.
Okay.
So I was at the point, this is the first time I figure out that I can write better if I don't know what comes next. Because I did the NaNoWriMo challenge, National November Writing Month. 50,000 words in November. And I managed to write 50,000 words in November, which basically was for me 1,650 words a day with Sunday free day. I knew that if I write this scene very fast, then I didn't know what was coming next. So I started to write the scene, to take it longer and longer and longer. And I realized that although it was longer than I was expecting, it was actually good. But as I was writing, so in the afternoon, I would think about this, what comes next, what comes in, and it came to me. So it's not like hitting my head. I have a friend to whom I talk, and she would ask me tricky questions that will just set my mind on the right path. And the current novel I'm working, I started with the idea with one scene, which is near the end of the book. And I said, I want to have this scene in the book because it's freaking awesome. It's cool. It's a nice twist, and it's something that will be really fun to write, and I can use my dark sense of humor to the maximum level. And I started from that scene, which is still not the ending. And I was like, how to come to this ending? And I called my friend and I was like, okay, I want to have this. The story, it's not about, I have two main characters. So the story should be based on the one of the main characters. And I was like, I want to talk about his past. He has a secret that is hidden. And this secret comes to the surface and he's being blackmailed. Okay. So let's start with this, with moral story. And I sit with her and we do the whole outline of the novel up to a certain point, and I still don't know the ending. So I will start writing, and as I do, I invent new characters, new scenes that weren't planned. Like I had one scene that was simply entering, how do you call it in English? Burgling, not burgling. To break and entering to the apartment of this guy. And out of this, I actually wrote 3 different chapters. And it turned out to be 30 pages. It was supposed to be just one scene, which means around 10 pages, 10, 12 pages. So for me, I only do the outline and go with the flow.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
And it's more
on, let's say on the second book, I knew the ending. So I had to work it out who my bad guy is. I didn't know the bad guy. That's the funny thing about it. I knew the ending, but I didn't know the bad guy. So I had to work out through my story somewhere when I was 1/3 in my story. I worked out who my bad guy is, so I had to go a little bit back to see if I can hint something, and it turned out that, I instinctively turned this character into the bad guy because what I wrote I could use to propel the story, like when people read and say, these were hints. At my 3rd novel, it's actually 3 stories that are connected. So for that, I wrote the first part of my first book. The book has 2 parts. So I wrote the first book, and when I wrote it, so my father has an orchard, and I'm helping out at the orchard, and I was trimming the plums, and I was thinking, and I was like, wait. I had this cool character who's like great to be the bad guy of the whole story. And then by thinking about how this character will be the bad guy of the whole story, how to develop the 3 other parts of the story, and the last part will be the perspective of the bad guy. Like basically to retell the whole story, but to see how the bad guy pulled all the strings for the things could happen. So for me, it comes...
different ways to approach.
Different ways. It starts with an idea. And I have a lot of ideas that are on standby, just waiting to be developed. So while I'm writing this story, I have another idea, which is basically building up. So when I'm finished with this one, it means I will work on something else, which has already been slightly developed. This is why for me, writing is living, because I'm breathing, because I have ideas. And these ideas are putting pressure on me, because I have them, I develop them, and they say, we need to get out. We need to get out. It was enough living in your mind. We need to get out. So then a new idea comes, and I feel the pressure of having 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas, and you have to get rid of something, so the pressure lowers and it's easier.
If you have to choose, which is the favorite idea that you have had?
I think words. Words was the longest idea I had. So that was the first novel I wrote, because the idea was born in 2001, or 2001. And the idea was basically came by reading a manga called Homunculus. And I had idea about a guy that lives alone in apartment covered with books. That was it. And I wanted to have this backstory and how to develop it. And during the years, I would build up on the character. I wouldn't go into details on the idea. I was only thinking about my character. What happened? What made him live an isolated life? Okay, so what does he do for a living? Because it has to be something isolated. And so everything was building the character. And that's why for me, when I started doing the NaNoWriMo challenge, it was easy. Because I didn't know the story, but I knew my character. So I knew how he would react in this situation and that situation. And I did the NaNoWriMo challenge in 2018. So 17 years. And you can imagine once I unleashed my writing novel or long stories energy. So for me, now not being able to write, it's a problem.
So let's say that the ideas, the longer are in your head, is not that they are slowly dying, but like the opposite. They are just desperate to get out.
I will paraphrase Stephen King. He said that when you pick in on an idea, which is a good idea, you know it because it's been lingering in your mind for a long time. Because we have many ideas, but if you forgot about the idea, it means it wasn't a good idea. But if it's still there, it means it's a good one. So for me, it's like that. There's been many ideas lingering in my mind.
What would you recommend to people that want to start their career as writers? What do you think is the best advice that you would like to have had at the beginning?
I would tell them not to rush. Like really, really not to rush. So everyone who's listening this, imagine I published my first novel when I was, I'm 40 now, when I was 37 years old. And I wanted to be a writer since I was 7, but I started working when I was 20 years on it, like developing. So for you, hopefully it won't take that long, but don't rush it. Like do some short stories, don't take your big ideas immediately, because you may get disappointed and you may give up. Or you may be brave and thinking you've written a masterpiece just to figure out that it wasn't and get disappointed after. So take your time, don't take 15 years, because I got married, I got 2 children, but I didn't get discouraged. So I would tell them to devote to it. Each second, minute of the free time to be spent on writing, and to learn how to find their mistakes. This is the best advice. Don't be afraid to get criticism. Find someone who will tell you, because most of your friends will tell you your work is perfect. It's not. Find the one guy who will tell you what's wrong with it. That's the guy that's your friend. So that's what they need. I had 2 people in my life like that. One of them is my friend Katerina, and the other one is my brother, Vanch. So that would be my advice.
The idea of your grandfather was kind of like very important for the process in a way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he will think about your career and about you?
I think he'll be pleased. I think because I was told that I've started telling stories since I was 9 months old. I could retell Little Red Riding Hood. So I guess that he would be proud, because he would see that I've grown out to be a true storyteller.
And my last question that I always ask, so just say whatever is in your mind. If you would like people to remember you with one song, what song would be?
Hey. The first one that popped my mind was Hey Ya by Outkast. It's not an easy question.
Whatever it is.
I'm scrolling through my library now of songs.
Okay.
You should have prepared me ahead of this. Still, I would have taken time to think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz.
Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz. Okay. So for everybody that is listening, this is Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz. This was Juan Around the podcast. And yeah, see you around. Thank you very much for listening.